Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at the 6 types of question that you could get in task 1 of the IELTS writing test. The IELTS writing test takes 60 minutes and it's split into 2 separate tasks. And it's your job to manage your time in that 60 minutes and split it between those 2 different tasks. Task 1 is slightly easier than task 2, so you're given slightly less time to complete that task. But of course, like I said before, it's your job to manage that time yourself. Now, when you go into the test, you're going to see a question where you'll have some writing at the top and you will have an image below that writing. First of all, let's have a look at what the writing at the top of the page will look like. Here you go. So it will look something like this. You can see at the top, it will give you some advice on how long you should take to complete the task. You should spend about 20 minutes on this task. And underneath that, you will have one sentence, which is describing what the image is about. You can see here it's about a graph. Under that sentence, you will see another sentence which doesn't really change. It says, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So really here, they're asking you to do 2 specific things, to summarize and to compare. These are the 2 skills that you need to work on and make sure you can do really well before you go into the test. Now underneath that, it just reminds you how much you need to write. Now for task 1, they ask you to write at least 150 words. That means that you can write more than that, but not less. You need to write at least 150 words. So once you've read that information at the top, and especially that sentence that's describing the image carefully, then you can look underneath that and you will see something. You'll see some kind of image. And this is where I need to explain the 6 different types of image that you might see. So let's start off with the first type. This is a line graph, something like this. Now a line graph, again, it's just representing some data in a graph, and you will see a number of lines. Of course, with a line graph, you will nearly always be describing changes over time. You can see on the bottom axis, you have time from 1 year to another year. So you will always be describing changes and summarizing the information you can see and making comparisons where you can. So you'll have to choose specific numbers on the graph. Now we can go into more detail on exactly how you do that in future videos. But now let's move on to the second type of image that you might see when you go into the test. This is a bar chart. Something a bit like this. Now you can see here, really it's very similar to a line graph. We can see that you have to describe changes again. On the bottom axis, you can see time from 1 year to another year. So in this way, it's very similar to a line graph. And again, you'll be summarizing and comparing information where you can. But a bar chart is slightly different in that it might not always look like this. You might get a bar chart that looks a bit like this. Now in this bar chart, you can see on the bottom axis, you can't see any time. This means that you won't be describing changes, but you will still be summarizing and making comparisons. But don't forget to look closely when you get a bar chart and think about what kind of thing you will be describing. So those are the first two types. Let's move on to the third type. This is a pie chart or pie charts. You can see in this example, you'll be describing changes because we have 3 pie charts in 3 separate years. So you'll definitely have to describe changes between those different years, summarizing and making comparisons where you can. But again, a pie chart is not always like this. You might get a fixed time pie chart. So you could get a task where you have 3 pie charts and they're all at the same time. So again, you won't be describing changes here, but you will be summarizing and making comparisons. Let's move on to the fourth type. That's a table. And it might look something like this. And again, in this first type, you can see there are separate years, so you'll be describing changes. But again, it might not always be like this. It could look a bit like this one, where you're not going to be describing changes because it's a fixed time. But you can summarize and compare the information that is in the table. So far, we've gone through 4 different question types. And these first 4 question types that I've shown you are really very, very similar because they're all representing data, numbers, figures. And your job is to summarize that data and make comparisons. So all 4 of these types might look quite different, but really what you're going to be doing with your writing is not so different at all. But we're not finished yet. There are 2 more types of question that are a little bit different. These are diagrams. The first type of diagram that you could be seeing when you're in the exam is a comparison diagram. It might look something like this. You can see here that we've got 2 maps, one in the present and one in the future. Now your job here is to describe the changes from now and until the future. The map that you get might not always look like this. You might get a map that shows one map in the present and another map in the past. Then you'll be describing changes from the past to the present. The reason why I don't say that this is a map task is because you might get a different kind of comparison diagram that might not look like a map. Here's one example for you. You can see here that it isn't a map, but you are still comparing a diagram. Here it's diagrams of a house or a building that you have to compare. So you need to be ready for anything, but the idea here is that you're comparing 2 separate diagrams. Now let's move on to the final type of image that you might see when you're in the test. Again, it's a diagram, but here it's a process diagram. Slightly different to a comparison diagram because you're not comparing 2 different diagrams. You're going to get one diagram which shows some sort of process. It might look something like this. Now, here you can see it's a natural process. It's showing the life cycle of a fish. And this is a common task that you could get if you're getting a process diagram, a natural cycle. But it's not always going to be a natural process. You also have to be ready to expect a man-made process, something like this. You can see here it's a production process, so how humans produce something. from the beginning to the end. But again, with a process, you will be summarizing. You're not really making comparisons here, but the task will say that at the top. Really here, you're going to be describing the process step by step from beginning to end. This is one type of task that I think really is quite simple, although a lot of students get a bit intimidated by this because they're worried they're going to see a process that they're not familiar with. So there are all 6 types of questions that you might be getting when you're in the test. I should tell you that there is a chance that you might get a task 1 where you'll see 2 images, maybe a bar chart and a table, or a pie chart and a graph. This is a possibility. But really, this doesn't make the task any more difficult. In fact, with all 6 types of question, we can actually use the same structure to give our answers. And there are some real similarities between the different tasks, especially with the first 4 types. Let's just quickly have a recap on those 6 different types of tasks to make sure you haven't forgotten. So the first type is a line graph. The second type is a bar chart. The third type, a pie chart. The fourth, a table. The fifth, a comparison diagram. And the sixth, a process diagram. So there we have it. In future videos, I will be going into more detail on how to answer these different types of tasks and sentences and vocabulary we can use when we're in the test. But I hope this video has been useful to you so you can really know what to expect when you're going into the test. If you did find this video useful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. And if you did like it, don't forget to give me a like as well. Okay, thanks for listening and see you in the next one.